Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are about to begin the 2044 season against our arch rival St. Louis Cardinals, who have beaten us for the division title 3 consecutive years. They've won, and we have been in second and in a wild card position. You can see they also barely beat us this preseason with a little bit of a better record than we had during spring training. Kind of a disappointing offseason for the Pirates, if I am to be completely honest. Haven't made a lot of changes to the team, and most importantly, we've really failed in all of our efforts to improve fan interest. Looks like we're going to sell about the same number of season tickets as we did last year. Granted, they will be at a higher price, so that is one minor step in the right direction as far as our finances. But our overall attendance per game this year is expected to be down. Hopefully, despite a relatively quiet off season, we can do well on the field and end up boosting revenue more than is expected at this point. Have the number 29 budget in baseball, the number 28 player payroll in baseball right now. But we do have about $11 million to take on salaries. So as we get closer to the trade deadline, if the team is competitive, as I expect that we will be, we will have the opportunity to fill some holes. Thinking about the offseason, not a ton that we did. Do have 3 new pitchers in Ethan Mingo, Danny Robles, and Mike Wright, who we all brought in through various trades in the early stages of the offseason, primarily as we were dumping arbitration-eligible players we really couldn't afford anymore. Everyday lineup are going to have a new backup catcher in Mario Quiroz, another player who we picked up in a trade. Tony Rendon, another player we traded for on board as a utility infielder. And then our backup outfielders this year are completely new. David Juarez and Arturo Arellano. Arellano was a Rule 5 draft pick that we made this past offseason. Relatively young player, pretty solid and versatile defensively, and looks like he may have a little bit of a bat. Obviously a huge jump for him up from high A ball to the majors, but is our kind of 26th man on the roster and a 5th outfielder. We felt that we could hopefully afford to keep him up all year, see if he can develop and maybe turn into a useful piece for our lineup or a useful trade chip down the line. And then we also have David Juarez, as I mentioned. He was a minor league free agent signing exactly a month ago. Another player who's pretty solid defensively, good personality, can even bunt and run a little bit. Doesn't look like he's going to be a great hitter, but between Juarez, who is a left-handed batter, Arellano, who's a switch hitter, I feel like we've got a little depth in our outfield. Obviously, the hope is that Isaiah Hill, Ramon Herrera, and Henry Gonzalez are out there as often as possible. And if those 3 stay healthy, that will be a big step in the right direction for our offense, really doing what we expect this year. Would expect that Luis Flores is typically going to be our first baseman, and Alfredo Velasquez, who can also play the outfield, probably normally going to be our DH. You can see he's slotted in as our DH and cleanup hitter right now by manager Jan Vasquez against both lefties and righties. And as we prepare to start the season today, owner Robert Nutting expects us to be a playoff team. As much as I would love to disagree and fight and quarrel and dispute with Mr. Nutting, I do have to agree with that assessment. That is certainly my goal, to get this team back to the playoffs. Other goals from him this year is to upgrade at third base. We really did not do much of anything to move in that direction. I mentioned that we did bring on Tony Rendon, but it looks like we're still going to be starting Jaden Dixon for the time being. And then at some point during the season, we'll probably bring Ethan Fox back up, who can potentially play third base for us also, but certainly didn't make a major improvement there. Before we really start things off, let's take a look at the preseason predictions for these Pirates. Oof. Expectation is that we are barely a 500 team. Oof. And the expectation is that the Cardinals fall quite dramatically. Not sure how accurate that will be, but if these forecasts are correct, we will not be a playoff team. The Reds will win the division. Mets in, Braves with a wild card, and then 3 teams out west with the Rockies winning the division, the Padres and the Dodgers ahead of us in the wild card race. So the expectation, at least from this simulation, is that there's going to be disappointment in Pittsburgh this season. We will see whether that happens or not. I have a tendency to think that we're definitely going to be more than an 82-win team. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to steer this team into the playoffs. Thinking about our path there, if our lineup is in the top half of the league in scoring, I'll feel like we're in pretty good shape because I'm pretty confident that our pitching is going to be among the top handful of pitching staffs in the National League. Once again, bringing back Longoria, AL Cy Young or NL Cy Young Award winner Tony Santana, Bobby Gonzalez, Jose Montoya, and Omar Gaona in the rotation. So feel like we're going to do a pretty good job of preventing teams from scoring runs, especially with the additions of Wright, Mingo, and Robles that I talked about. So if we get any offense whatsoever, I'm pretty confident this team will end up in the playoffs. But now we're going to start playing the games, and we're going to find out for sure. So it's good to get out of the month of March. 2-5 record for the Pirates. We're already 4.5 games behind. So obviously not the start that we were hoping for. The Cardinals, not surprisingly, have won 7 in a row after we did beat them on opening day. And they are in their familiar spot on top of the division. But there is certainly a lot of baseball to still be played. And getting close to midway through April, and it's been a rough year for the Pirates. 5-12 record. Our arch nemesis, the Cardinals, are having a great season, and our former team, the Royals, started 15-0. They're 15-1 now, so definitely not going well. Still early stages, but at some point we may have to start making some changes, but probably going to at least get through the month of April, have hopefully 30, 35 games under our belt before we start doing anything too rash. And obviously with the team playing poorly on the field, 9-16 record, attendance has been brutal, so not shockingly, revenue and attendance way down. Still hope that we can get the ship righted, but it's going to get a little more difficult. Alfredo Velasquez, our starting first baseman, who hasn't been hitting well, 184 average and 5 home runs and 87 at-bats, out with a high ankle sprain for 4 weeks. And we're also waiting to hear about a potential injury to center fielder Ramon Herrera. Checking in on our big guns, Isaiah Hill actually having a really disappointing season so far, 237 average, only 4 homers and 97 at-bats. And Henry Gonzalez, 265 average and 4 homers and 83 at-bats. Would certainly expect that we're going to get more from those 2 players, so hopefully that will be a sign that our offense will be getting somewhat better. Taking a look at the team statistics, we're 14th in the league in runs scored, and we're 11th in the league in runs allowed, and our starters' ERA is 4.81, which is just not something we are familiar with. Longoria and Santana both been pretty solid. Gonzalez and Gaona respectable. The youngster Jose Montoya has been horrible thus far, but certainly going to give him an opportunity to work through his early season issues. 5 starts does not make a season. And unfortunately, the news on Ramon Herrera, even worse. He's going to be out for 2 months with a hamstring strain. So that is going to leave us with a hole in the outfield. And it does mean that another prospect is coming up, Alex Ruacho, who has not gotten off to a good start in AAA this year, hitting just a $183. But I think he's potentially ready. He gives us another versatile glove, and I think between Ruaucho, Gonzalez, and Hill, we should be able to have center field covered. I don't want Arthur Arellano out there. We'll force start one of the younger guys in center field if we need to. Ruaucho's got decent range. I think probably Ruaucho is the guy that we're going to want to play there. So we're going to set his possession to center field. See when we go back to the lineups whether that will make Vasquez play him there over Arellano or, yep, okay, so that's good. So Alex Ruaucho making his major league debut under duress. He's the guy that we picked 4th overall in 2039. Second season as GM of the Pirates. We'd picked Gonzalez number 1 overall the year before. He's the number 32 prospect in baseball. We'll see what he can do at the major league level. Hopefully he can help us jumpstart this offense, which definitely needs a boost at this point. Unfortunately, the Pirates did play better baseball over the last couple of weeks of the month of April. Still have a losing record of 15-18, still 6 games behind. But when we look at the standings, we have climbed out of last place. We've won 3 in a row, 8-2 over our last 10, so that is positive. Take a quick look at the team statistics, and still 14th in the league in runs scored, but runs allowed we're up to tied for 7th. So our pitching staff is starting to get a little better. We ended up at least being 500 in April, which given where we were a couple weeks ago is a pretty good finish to the month. So hopefully we can build on the better results over the last couple of weeks and have a winning record in baseball, or a winning record in the month of May. Start position ourselves to get back over 500 for the season, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and then have a winning record by the end of the month of May, and then at least things will be stabilized as we start getting closer to having to decide who we're going to trade for to hopefully help get us over the hump. And we've gotten up to 500 by just a week after we last checked in, 20-20 record. So the Pirates playing really well. Unfortunately, the youngster Alex Ruaucho going to be out with a sprained ankle for 5 weeks. So the injuries to our outfield continue. He was holding his own in the majors, hitting just .239. Did hit 4 doubles, but only 1 home run and 46 at bats. So hasn't seemed completely overwhelmed, but also hasn't been great. He has struck out 16 times in those 46 at-bats. So he's going to go on to the IL, and that's going to leave us with a little bit in the way of fewer options in the outfield. We may have to go back to Arellano as our starting center fielder, at least for a little while, given that Herrera's still going to be out for even longer than Ruaucho is. And as we get to the end of May, things are going much better. You can see we're 31-24 now, so it's been a really great month of May for the team. 8-2 over our last 10, 4 wins in a row, up to second place, 4.5 behind the Cardinals, and actually in the first wild card spot at this point. So had some bad luck certainly over the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Hopefully that has changed at this point. Fan interest is kind of moving up a little bit now, and attendance is moving in the right direction with the fact that we are playing much better, so that's positive. Hopefully we can continue that for an extended period of time. Still dealing with the injuries, getting closer to Velasquez being back, should be back tomorrow hopefully. Herrera and Ruaucho still several weeks away, but we've been managing okay at this point. Taking a look at team stats, obviously had a great month so far with a 16-6 record, still 14th in the NL in runs scored, but the pitching has really turned around the way we would have hoped. 4th in the NL in runs allowed, and our starters still definitely underperforming what we would have expected, so hopefully we'll get that straightened out as the season continues to move along. The disappointing thing is that our Pythagorean record, and you probably saw this the last time we checked in, is well below where we are. 4 games. We should be 4 games worse than we are. The offense has obviously been very disappointing. Hopefully, we're going to start scoring some more runs at some point. You look at it, and other than home runs, we're kind of in the top 10, top 9, top 11 in most of the offensive categories, better in a few significantly, like walking and avoiding strikeouts. So hopefully we can score more runs than we have been as the season continues to move along, particularly when we get potentially 3 pretty important bats to our team back. So the month of May is now in the books, going well for the Pirates and generating a little bit of fan interest organically through the better play. Hopefully we can continue doing that. Our attendance and our revenue are still way down given the poor start to the season and our higher ticket prices, but we're going to try to hold the line on ticket prices for the time being, assuming that we'll be playing better over the next several months, and hopefully the fans will like to see a competitive team kind of right where we expected to be despite the really slow start, struggling to keep up with the Cardinals in the Central, 5.5 games behind them. You can see both teams playing very well over their last 10. We're 8-2 and we've lost ground on them. And we're in the number 1 wild card position. So although it's been kind of a weird start to the season and the very slow start had us a little bit worried, I'm not going to lie to you. Things are going pretty good right now. Greg Gaylord tied for the league lead in saves, and Tony Santana following up his Cy Young Award winning season last year with a solid start to the season, a 2.4 pitcher WAR, which is 3rd among National League pitchers. And the Pirates still playing well here in the early stages of June, 42-30 record, 4.5 back. Alex Racho's recovery is unclear at this point, and we did have another somewhat minor injury, but Sean Barley, our former NL Rookie of the Year first baseman, out with a bone bruise for another couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll get these guys back at some point in the not-so-distant future, but we've been holding things together decently despite those significant players being on the injured list. Runs scored, a little bit of progress. We're up to tied for 13th, but runs allowed we're 2nd. Starters ERA 6th now. Bullpen ERA best in the National League. So starting to get the pitching that we had hoped, which has really propelled us to that great month of May and a more than acceptable start to June, playing .600 baseball thus far. And we've gotten to our mid-season evaluation with Mr. Nutting really pretty early, June 22nd, but we're 48-34. Says we're doing a heck of a job with the team, wants to keep us up and make the postseason. Doesn't see an improvement at third base, disappointed in our progress in attendance. Overall, he seems pretty happy with us, but he still keeps only giving us 1-year contract extensions. But we'll see what happens there. Also got some decisions to make on our coaches over the coming weeks and months as we prepare for next year. But right now, our whole focus is going to be on this season. 4.5 games behind the Cardinals. We are up 5.5 on the wild card at this point, though, clearly locked into that first wild card spot, number 4 seed overall in the National League, which if we can maintain that at least means we'd get a home playoff series, which hasn't been easy for us to achieve the last several seasons. Typically have found ourselves in that second wild card spot, 5th seed, or on most occasions. So again, with the miserable start we had to the season and the miserable offseason we had, can't complain about the way the season is going, and we're trying to organically generate the fan interest by playing better baseball. Hopefully that'll keep us moving in a good direction. Certainly would think that there's going to be potential. We're going to try to use some of that money we've got available to bring on some players who can help us as we get closer to the trade deadline, but at least it feels like things have really stabilized for the Pirates right now. And this one is a big blow to the Pirates. Luis Flores, the former Rule 5 pick who's become our starting first baseman, year is over with a ruptured MCL. He's going to be out for 9 months. So that will definitely leave a hole in the lineup. Not the biggest power hitter in the world, but a 292 batting average, 398 on base percentage, 126 OPS plus, 125 WRC plus. Great personality. Definitely a loss. I guess the only silver lining is that Sean Barley is also ready to come off of the IL today, so that'll probably mean a little more playing time for the former NL Rookie of the Year. I would think that we'll see what happens. Yeah, he's putting Velasquez actually into first base, and then Barley is our DH against lefties. Steve Valadares, our DH against righties. So a little bit more action for Barley coming off of the IL. Hopefully he can kind of reinvigorate the career that has really gone sideways since that Rookie of the Year. It was a bit of a surprising Rookie of the Year, quite honestly. 286 average and 9 home runs isn't generally going to win Rookie of the Year in a lot of seasons, but it was clearly a down year for NL rookies in 2042. He got the award. Last year split the season when he still had options between AAA and the majors, and certainly did not perform well in the majors. Doing a little better this season, and hopefully with a little bit more regular playing time. Again, he can do something to kind of kickstart his career and help us generate a little bit of offense over the coming weeks. In some good news, Alex Racho ready to come off of the IL. He's been gone so long, we're actually going to send him on a rehab assignment for at least a couple of days. He's also a player who could probably use a little seasoning in AAA, but only going to be a couple days down there. We're definitely going to bring him back up. We've got some guys like Valadares, Suarez, and Arellano who are up, who probably wouldn't be up in a perfect world. So we're definitely going to have Racho back on the major league team sooner rather than later, but since it has been a couple months at this point almost since he got injured, I can tell you the exact amounts. Okay, he was injured on May 7th, so yeah, close to 2 months, 7+ weeks that he's been banged up. Give him a couple days down in AAA to hopefully work the kinks out, and then get him right back up here. And the month of June is now in the books, 52-38 record for the Pirates. So the season is definitely stabilized and have generated a little bit of fan interest organically. I'm starting to think maybe we've been so obsessed with trying to get that number up here in Pittsburgh that we've almost put ourselves on the roller coaster a bit of bringing on players that have lots of fan interest and popularity, and then losing them, and then just kind of creating this vicious cycle that's been pretty frustrating. Maybe the focus is just keep trying to build a winning team on the field, and that will take care of itself, more similar to the way it was in Kansas City, where we were in a better situation as far as fan loyalty and in those kind of things, but it'll take some time, but we've been pretty successful on the field, hopefully on the way for our 4th consecutive winning season, and hopefully our 5th winning season in 7 seasons as general manager here of the Pirates, unless we really regress over the second half of the season. Taking a look at the team statistics, had a respectable June, 16-12 record, not as great as our May, but clearly we're not expecting to play 724 baseball for the long term. But as I said, the season is definitely stabilized at this point. 12th in runs scored is still disappointing. Hopefully, when we do get back some of the players who are on the IL, that will help. Runs allowed, 4th in the league. We're in the top 5, which is where we want to be. Starters ERA is still not great at this point, which is a little bit surprising. It's really been Montoya who's been the big disappointment. Gaona, if your number 5 starter's got a ERA in the mid-4s, you can probably certainly live with that. But Montoya's been disappointing in terms of his ERA, although he does lead us with 10 wins. Bobby Gonzalez is getting to be a little older, not quite as good as he used to be. I think that sinker used to be a little better, so his 3rd and 4th pitches at this point certainly aren't even major league average, but he's still a respectable, back of the rotation kind of guy. Would feel better if he was our 4th or 5th starter rather than our 3rd starter. That potentially can come with time. Longoria and Santana, somewhat shockingly, both have losing records despite ERA in the mid-3s for each of them. Think that hopefully that will turn around for both of them over the next couple of months of the season. Looking at the bullpen, Greg Gaylord, who took over as our closer when we had to make the painful move last offseason to move on from our closer, has done a great job for us. A 1.11 ERA, 27 saves. Most of the relievers have been pretty good. Kind of funny, but not funny to see that Elijah Helton, who we brought back as a middle reliever on a pretty expensive contract, simply, or not simply, but largely because he was extremely popular when we were still focused on that at the beginning of last offseason, is actually, having the weakest year of any of our bullpen members. But overall, I think we're in a good spot. And as I mentioned, Bobby Gonzalez potentially moving down to a 4 or 5 spot in the rotation in the not so distant future. Certainly would hope that Montoya does better. But we do also potentially have the cavalry coming with some of our young pitchers. Sal Valadez down in AAA, 7-5 record, 4.13 ERA. Cortez Ronquillo, not as much of a prospect, also older, but Juan Bin Daoud was picked in that same draft as Gonzalez and Valadez, 6-4 with a 3.12 ERA. Felix Bath has been real good down there the last couple years. You can see 17 wins a year ago, 9-3 this year with a 3.27 ERA. And then Bobby Astorga, 9-4 with a 3.34 ERA. So we have got good, solid starters on the way. I think Astorga, Bin Daoud, and Valadez are the 3 top ones. Would think that we'll have some of them up in the not-so-distant future, particularly if we have some injuries. But with Longoria, Santana, and Montoya hopefully firmly entrenched in the rotation, and in the case of Longoria, hopefully being able to maintain his health, feel pretty confident that we can potentially move Gaona back into the bullpen as a lefty out of the bullpen at some point over the next season and a half. Maybe move Gonzalez down to our number 5 starter and get some starts for some of those young pitchers. What becomes of Luis Longoria is also a big issue. He's fragile. He's obviously exceptional when he is healthy. But his arbitration number next year is going to be over $10 million most likely. So he is getting to the point where we may look to have to move on from him. If we can get another healthy and productive season out of him this season, with the fact that he is fragile and the fact that we do have some pretty good potential starters coming up behind him, it may be time to move on from Longoria and see what we can get for him in trade. He should have a lot of value if he can get through this season without any major injury issues. But obviously that's not guaranteed. And taking a look at the offense, which has not been great as we as we begin the month of July. Nelson Ibarra has definitely been disappointing offensively as our starting catcher since we picked him up from Texas, hitting just 208 this year. And Mario Quiroz, 233 as our backup. That's fine. Sean Barley, we talked about not that long ago. We'll see what he can do with a little more action this year. I don't think he's a big time player that we're going to be building around for the long term. Alfredo Velasquez has had the pop with 11 home runs and 197 at-bats, but hitting just 213. That's got to get better. Juan Rivera at second base, batting just 244. Jaden Dixon at third base, hitting just 211. Maybe time to move on from Jaden Dixon and kind of force Ethan Fox into that starting third baseman role. He's hit 296 and 71 at-bats since we brought him up. Kind of intended that he would be our third baseman. I don't necessarily think that we're going to make Mr. Nutting happy by moving Ethan Fox into that role, but I certainly don't think he's going to do worse than Jaden Dixon has for us thus far. So actually, I think I'm going to change that right now while we are talking about it. We're going to give the youngster Ethan Fox the ability to be out in that lineup every day. See that Jan Vasquez is going to have him hitting 7th against lefties and 6th against righties. Not pleased with what we've gotten out of Dixon, so I think a change is in order there. Tony Rendon has been very disappointing, 121 batting average and 91 at-bats. I think he's a better offensive player than that. Unfortunately, he's out of option years. Don't want to risk losing him if we put him on the waiver wire, so really have nothing to do but keep the utility infielder up here, and can't imagine he's going to hit worse the rest of the way. Tony Cota hitting 253, excellent defensive shortstop. If he hits anywhere in the mid 250s, which is where he's been hitting the last few years, think that he's a pretty valuable player. Although his WAR this year of 0.6 is not on pace for as strong a season as he has had in the past. Isaiah Hill has finally started to hit a little bit. 273 batting average is about as low as it gets for him, but does now have 19 homers and 57 ribbies. Arturo Arellano hitting 265, has hit 253 at-bats because of all the injuries to our center fielders, but hopefully he'll be back into a backup role sooner rather than later. Henry Gonzalez kind of bouncing back a little bit, still not the power that we would have hoped for, but he is hitting 287, 17 doubles, 9 homers, and 282 at-bats. Looks like he's almost fully developed at this point, so the 2043 NL Rookie of the Year doesn't seem to be having a significant sophomore slump. David Juarez has been up with us, hitting 271 and 70 at-bats as a backup outfielder. And then Steve Valadares is another guy that we brought up from the minors. He's another minor league free agent signing that we made. Certainly guys like Arellano, Juarez, and Valadares, their roster spots will be in jeopardy as we bring Ruacho back, and hopefully sooner rather than later, Herrera back also. Would think that 2 of the 3 of them may be back down in AAA, or more likely waived and DFA'd, and see if we can get them down to AAA that way. And the last thing we'll do before we finish off this episode is take a look at the international amateur free agents. Luis Ibarra, shortstop, 16-year-old. Not really a shortstop. Could be a really nice third baseman. Could play first, second, or short, but has limitations at particularly second and short. Looks like could have a pretty interesting bat. Not a ton of speed. Don't love the low intelligence. We don't know a ton about him, unfortunately, but certainly looks like a respectable prospect to think about. Really interested in seeing what these catchers look like. Chris Flores, 16-year-old, not all that great defensively. Looks like he could have a acceptable bat for a major league catcher, though. And Chris Fernandez, a little better catcher ability, a little worse arm. Again, looks like he could have a acceptable ish major league bat if he fully developed. Do like the durability. Giobe Barafaldi of Venezuela looks like he could be a nice defensive center fielder. Has some speed. Looks like an acceptable hitter. Not the worst prospect in the world, not the best prospect in the world. And then finally another catcher, Donzel Riegi. Like the personality, don't love the defense. Like the durability. The bat's not great. He's never going to walk. Doesn't have much speed. He is young, and he's got that high work ethic. Guessing there's probably not too much in the pitchers, although Jose Roy Ball certainly stands out. Durable pitcher. Has the stamina to start. Probably doesn't have the 3 pitches you'd like to see from a starter in a perfect world, so that's a little bit of an issue. I don't love any of these prospects. I mean, I think it's hard not to lob in a bid on Ibarra just because he stands out as the best player and certainly looks like he could be a pretty interesting third baseman down the line. If these catchers were better defensively, I'd feel better about really going after them. So I don't love anybody this year. I think we'll start off by just putting in a $5 million on Ibarra. Meet his demand, submit the offer. We'll find out in the coming days whether that goes anywhere or whether we need to fall back on somebody else or perhaps just decide that this is a year where we're going to save the $5 million. That would not be the worst thing either. Hopefully that would help us make more money and maybe get a bigger budget. Taking a look at the accounting, projected to make only $11 million this year, which isn't optimal. But I do think that with the slow start to the season and the higher ticket price, obviously our attendance was brutal in April into May. Hopefully now we are going to be selling out or close to selling out for most of the rest of the season, which should improve our revenue per game number over the next 2.5, 3 months. If we get into the playoffs, which hopefully we will, that'll allow us to generate a little bit of extra revenue that will largely go right to the bottom line. So feel like we can be in a decent financial position at the end of this season. And certainly, as I mentioned, if we don't end up spending $5 million on a minor league free agent, that'll flow right to the bottom line also, although it's certainly not sustainable, since certainly the assumption would be next year we'd be right back in the minor league international amateur free agent market trying to find somebody else to help us out. But we'll see how that all plays out in our next episode as far as the international amateur free agent. We'll see what happens with the All-Star game. We'll see what happens with the draft. And then we're going to spend some time perusing who's available through trade, whether they're actively being shopped or just another player that we want to make an offer for. Want to get this Pirates team back into the playoffs. Certainly would love to do it as divisional champions if we could. But St. Louis is a tough team that's got a much bigger payroll than us. And really one of the key things in St. Louis's dominance over us is not just that they have the second largest budget and the third largest player payroll in all of the game, which is really impressive to see the amount of money that they are generating. But Tony Machuca, who we had a couple of years ago, we made a trade with the Twins right before the trade deadline. And you can see he pitched well for us, a 5-2 record with a 3.61 ERA, 100 strikeouts over 82 1/3 innings. We by no means had the financial wherewithal to be able to bring him back, and he signed a big contract with the Cardinals, making $31 million a year. But the move of Machuca from our team to the Cardinals has certainly been a tough situation for us in Pittsburgh, because that's a big swing to have a big time pitcher like that, who's excellent, an Iron Man, goes out and pitches, 32, 33 games every season and very high quality innings that he's giving his team. Having a pitcher like that, who we had for a little while, who's now on our arch rival, is always going to make it a little harder to get past them. But that's our goal, and we'll see what we can do over the month of July to position ourselves better for a stretch run and hopefully a run at a NL Central title this season. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.